Hello guys, welcome back to Blockchain Ravi. And through this show, I'm on a mission to help the listener to get better grasp of crypto understanding, and by getting into conversation with some of the leading voices in this space. And in this episode, I'm going to get into conversation with Ankur Banerjee and Matthew Arnold from Project cheqd. So guys, let's get learn more about Project cheqd. So let's welcome Ankur and Matthew.
Okay, Ravi, over to you, sir.
Okay, so let's start the today's session. So Ankur, could you please introduce about yourself and your project check?
Yes, absolutely, Ravi. Nice to meet you. So I'm Anka Banerjee. I'm the CTO at cheqd, and I'm one of the co-founders as well, along with Fraser Edwards. And cheqd is a project which is based in the Cosmos SDK ecosystem. And what we are trying to build is a decentralized network that gives people and companies control of their sort of private and personal data back in their hands. Because I think we all see this from just the way that the web has developed is there are companies like Google, Facebook, which capture TikTok, capture data. They use that for advertising, and just in general, I think in when we go through daily life, most of the time when we share facts about ourselves, we have to do them by sharing pieces of paper or certificates or credit cards. So we think there's a better future for this, where you can have this in a digital wallet that you can control, and you can choose what sort of data you want to share with people. And so we've been going for just about 2 years now. We launched or started as a company in April 2021, and we launched our main net, and which was Cosmos TK, as I mentioned before, near the end of November 2021. And since then, what we've been doing is we've been building out tons of partnerships, tons of software integrations, and applications on how people can actually implement kind of more private and secure digital identity.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Ankur, for explaining. Uh, so I want to know more about how the idea of check started.
So the idea behind cheqd started from a lot of personal experiences as well as the work background that me and Fraser, the co-founder, have. We both used to work at a large consulting company, which you might know about, called Accenture. And at Accenture, we worked on digital identity systems for governments, for banks, for hospitals and healthcare providers, in retail industry. So we have a lot of experience in how the digital identity, or just proving you are, is done in the traditional world. And I think we both got interested about, sort of 5, 6 years ago in blockchain systems, and we started developing or working on applications within that company on blockchain-based solutions around digital identity. And what we found was, while there are many projects that are out there that are trying to tackle the same problem, uh, there were a couple of challenges that we saw. So some of the challenges that we saw were, most of the projects that are out there weren't necessarily solving the problem of why will it make commercial sense for people to maybe move away from things like advertising to this kind of more private and secure digital identity model. I think a lot of projects try and do something in this space without actually answering the question. So that's the main thing we set out to do. But the second thing also to look at is many of the other blockchain projects that exist in this space weren't really designed to be scalable to maybe uh, like a large number of users. So if you take the example of something that works on, say, Ethereum or blockchain platforms, typically the gas fees are pretty high. The transaction speeds can be quite slow. So we also want to solve those things, and hence why we started building on Cosmos SDK. I think for me, it also comes from a lot of personal experience. So I've lived in India. I've lived in a lot of countries in Asia, and I know the pain that is there with the amount of just paperwork that you need to do. uh, and I think, like, just looking at the amount of times that you just ask for documents and paperwork, I think there's a better way to do that digitally. So partly it came from personal background and personal experience for a lot of people within the team, but also we have deep expertise in this industry within the team at cheqd. And we also wanted to therefore go and fix the problems that we had seen in digital identity solutions.
Thank you so much, Ankur, for knowing us the fact. And as you know, there are a lot of projects which are related to building this similar type project, products like SSI, digital identity things. So what makes cheqd stand out amongst its competitor?
I think the main thing that makes cheqd stand out from its competitors is, well, number one, like I mentioned, it depends really on what you're comparing it to. So at the very basics, compared to other solutions that are being built on Ethereum or Hyperledger Indy is one of the other big blockchains that it's built on, we are significantly faster. So if you think of, like, comparing the fees and the costs of running a similar network, or how quick the transactions can be, there's a huge difference by the Cosmos SDK base that we have built. And for comparison, some like Ethereum might do maybe tens of transactions per second. We know that we can scale to thousands of transactions per second. And it makes a difference because let's say you're at an airport and you have to show your visa and you have to show maybe your travel documents, and you have that in a digital format. You don't want to be standing in line for hours at an end, just waiting for a transaction to go through. So I think the transaction speed is one of the major ones. But I think that the big idea that we've been working on is, let's say you have a digital copy of your identity. This can be things like education degree, your health records, your travel records, maybe your reputation and on forums. If you had that in a digital fashion and you showed that to someone, we are building what we call mechanisms for this commercial mechanisms that allow you to get paid as an individual, because that's your data and that's being, like, sent across to other people. But in other, like, examples, it could also be the company or the organization that gave you that data in the first place. Maybe they could be paid. We're building an extremely flexible model, which we haven't seen so far in the companies that are building in this space. That's because we think there will be many, many different business models, some where you as an individual could get, and where other companies get paid. Um, and that, I think, is what makes us unique.
That's amazing, and it seems very interesting, and I'm really dived down to rabbit hole. So could you please tell more about just like self-sovereign identity, verifiable credentials, and verifiable presentations, and decentralized identifiers?
Of course. So the a lot of different, like, scary new terminologies over there. Um, so self-sovereign identity, or SSI as it's called, is the idea that if you have some information, you should be able to control it. A good example of this is, let's say you want to open a bank account in India. You probably go to a bank branch and they ask you for your Aadhaar card, and they ask you to fill out a form. they probably ask you for maybe electricity bills or something like that that says you're actually Ravi and like this is where you live, etc., etc. For you, uh, went across to a different bank or you wanted to get a loan from somewhere else, you're constantly having to do that act again and again. Like every single time you have to show or take across the same pieces of paperwork when you open a new account or you go to a new place. So the idea behind self-sovereign identity is that number one, you have it in an electronic or digital format. And it's a bit like e-Aadhaar, except instead of the government controlling it and the government have a copy, you have a copy that you control, and that's in your own wallet. And that's where the other two terms come in, the verifiable credentials and the IDs, which are decentralized identifiers. The simple sort of like explanation to that is if you think of how in Google Pay or in Apple Pay, you can have cards or passes that you store within the Google Pay wallet or the Apple Pay wallet. It's like that, but if you could do it for any kind of data you had on your. So this could be your health records going back for 10 years, 20 years. It could be your education degree. It could be what address do you live in? It could be your electricity bills. Like the idea is that that is a tamper-proof record that's electronic. And because it's electronic, it's a lot easier to share as well with everybody else. And the way that this is made tamper-proof is using decentralized identifiers that are stored on a blockchain, and it sends a signal to other people that says this pass or this verifiable credential has not been tampered from when it was issued. And so it also adds a lot more trust into the system that the document that you're showing to someone digitally is genuine and they can trust the information that's within it.
Thank you so much, Ankur, for sharing all those things. And yeah, it will be really become very easy for the Indian people or any people around the globe when this all this work. So now I would like to move it to my next question. So, what are the use cases of checked? And I have recently, as your recently posted blog on Payment Trail, I have seen it. If you could bring some light on how much time it will take.
Sure. So the use cases that we see at Checked are quite diverse. We don't necessarily look at building out all of them ourselves. We have about 50 plus companies that are partners. And so some of them are building on like education, some of them are building in banking, some of them are building in healthcare. So what we enable is we build the blockchain network, we build the software, and we typically go and build custom solutions for those industries. So just to give an example, we spoke about banking earlier. If you opened one bank account and then you wanted to open another bank account, you could in this model you could take the check from having opened up a bank account, let's say with ICICI, can take it across to a different place and reuse it so that you don't have to provide the same paperwork again. But other examples are, let's say you're trying to travel internationally, you have to provide a lot of paperwork to get a visa, and you could provide in a digital fashion. You could provide your entire travel history. Other examples are in healthcare, for example, if you are going from your doctor to a different hospital, you often don't have an electronic copy of your records that you can share easily. So that could also be enabled using SSI or self-sovereign identity as we speak about it. The payment piece comes in on let's say you want a copy of your records from your doctor so that you can take it across to a different hospital, what is in it for your doctor to actually go through the effort of giving you your medical records? Because right now, it's just going to be a lot of effort and hassle for them to do that in the first place. And what we think in terms of payment rails is that once you have this digital credential in your wallet and you go across to a different hospital and you show this digital record, there's a payment that is either made to you. So, for example, somebody might pay for digital access to your records, they might pay you into your wallet some amount of money, or they might pay some amount of money to your doctor who originally gave you those medical records. And the idea is that by building in a payment rail or a payment mechanism, as we call it, it gives it gives a reason for people to share these digital credentials and actually build an ecosystem where your data is in your control and you can share more easily.
That's amazing. That will also eradicate some kind of corruption in India also. If it brings in an adoption of India, Indian government it gives sufficed. So Ankur, I have also read your roadmap which you have recently posted. So I would like you to explain the most important stages in achieving the goal of SSI adoption, as my viewers are interested in understanding your strategies.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the roadmap that you're referring to, if I give a sort of quick summary to people, is uh, we have been going for about like 2 years at this point. A lot of the early stages of that was just in building the blockchain and building the software to have these uh, digital passes or digital credentials that I've been talking about. What we are sort of really focused on this year is building the payments piece so that people can pay each other when this identity information is exchanged. And that's one of our key focuses. But the other part is that it needs to be simple to use. What I mean by that is uh, when you look at the crypto space or when you look at the Web3 space, as it's called, um, it's actually still complex. I mean, it's not that easy to set up a crypto wallet. It's not that easy to have a digital wallet. I think especially when you consider the how unfamiliar it is, whether you're talking about the US or India or the UK, crypto is still quite a small community overall compared to the whole population. And so I think to make something that extremely simple to use. And the way that I think about it is, would my parents be able to use it? My grandparents be able to use it? I think there's a lot of like focus that we're putting into making the experience itself simple to understand, safe and secure. That takes a lot of engineering effort and work. And so that's what we are spending a lot of the other time that we're spending in our roadmap is trying to build and make it as simple as possible. So if you think of how easy it is perhaps to say click login using Google or login using Facebook when you're browsing online, it needs to be as simple as that, which I don't think necessarily all crypto experiences are at the moment. And then the final one is think it's nice to think of use cases like, okay, maybe you can share your university degree, or maybe you can open a bank account more easily, or you can take your health records easily. But those necessarily aren't very fun. People also don't do that often. People don't open bank accounts every few months. So what we've been also like looking at more recently
So I
is
have
how
also
can we
questions
look at
regarding our
experiences
India.
for
As we have seen,
online communities, for
we can
crypto
see a massive
forums,
adoption
for
of crypto in
DAOs,
India. So how do you
for
think
Telegram
SSI
groups,
can help
and places
India
like
in their
that on
crypto
how do
journey?
we handle the problem of
I think that's a very
reputations
good
and
question.
scams that come
SSI can help
within the crypto community a
India
lot,
with its crypto
and
journey
building a
because
fun, private,
I
and secure
think
experience
that is
compared
different than
to
NFTs
most
or
of the
non-fungible
world.
token.
India does actually already have one of the most advanced, perhaps, digital identity systems. I think the fact that most people have an Aadhaar card, which has got your biometric details, it's digitally stored. In most places, you can use it. I think that's quite unique. In fact, we don't have that in the UK. We don't have that in the US. Most of these systems in the UK and US, you still have to use pieces of paper to do it, which might surprise a lot of people. But I think the fact that the Indian sort of government was a bit of a pioneer in building the Aadhaar system is quite unique, and it's relatively advanced compared to a lot of countries. I've been to a lot of these identity conferences where people want to learn from India in how to do digital identity. I think the flip side of is Aadhaar is not necessarily very private to you as an individual. It is a government-controlled identity, and therefore, most of the time when it gets used, the government has an idea of what you're using it. So I think there's, having said that, I think a lot of the Indian government and a lot of the Indian institutes of technology, for example, have been doing research in blockchain for a long time and looking at how SSI can be used, not replacing perhaps Aadhaar necessarily for government use cases, having it maybe coexist alongside the Aadhaar system. I think that there's a lot of work that has already been done in India on this front makes it significantly easier, and it's one area where India can probably very quickly maybe significantly put even more distance from how easy it is to do these things online than other countries.
Yes, exactly. After the implementation of Aadhaar, the things becomes more easier. So my next question is, do you think that government of countries will soon give SSI a place in their countries?
Definitely. I think governments are exploring self-sovereign identity because they see this as a I think there's been a lot of movement towards regulation and laws around the world that give people more control of their data. I think people realize that a lot of this is a lot of these experiences are happening online, and governments are also concerned about hacking, data breaches, and scams, and how to prevent those. So what we've seen sort of around the world is that governments like the government of India, but also especially within Europe, within other countries in Southeast Asia, in the US, in most places around the world, governments are funding large-scale projects to adopt self-sovereign identity. I think the biggest examples of this is the European Union. In Europe, they have been funding for 5 to 6 years to convert all of these things that right now might be happening in plastic or paper form to happen all digitally using self-sovereign identity technology. And so the European Union has been one of the biggest funders for block-based digital identity. And a lot of the partners we work with are from Europe, and the idea here is that for governments, it is significantly cheaper to give you a digital identity than it is for them to constantly uh, send you letters by post, ask for paperwork to be taken to physical offices. So I think governments recognize that people these days want options, and they recognize that it should be secure in a fashion that it, as much as possible, prevents hacking and scams. And so there's a huge amount of interest in this.
Thank you so much. So I have heard that check open rooms for collaboration with other projects building the same use cases. So, among all the project building similar use cases, which project will check likely partner with?
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So I think our whole strategy is based around partnerships because we know for a fact that we can't ourselves as a team be building solutions for every single country. Like I think there's about 160 or 190 countries around the world. Um, we couldn't possibly cover all of them ourselves. And I think, as I mentioned before, we are the software that we've designed, or the blockchain sort of like we've designed, it's not specific to one particular industry. It can be used in any industry. And so for us to try and ourselves build out something in banking or education or healthcare uh, would be quite tough unless you have a very, very large team. So from the beginning, our strategy has been it's a bit like how Google built Android and it makes Android available. And there are many, many different phone manufacturers who build handsets on Android. So the idea is very similar. We build the software and we have a ton of different partners who go and implement solutions, perhaps something that is like we have partners who work in Europe and they're working with European governments for the European market for digital identity. And we have other partners who are based in India and they're building solutions that are more localized to India. So it's not necessarily about picking one particular company to partner with, but we fundamentally want to make it as easy as possible for developers around the world to build on our software. That number is about 40 different partners right now, but ultimately the idea is that the more partners that we get involved with around the world, uh, the better it is for the check token and for the check blockchain sort of ecosystem to be more sustainable in the long run.
I wish some Indian project also take part into the check.
Yes, there's out of that, I think there's probably about I think 3 or 4 that are based in India. So which is quite exciting because I think, as you said, like the Indian market is uh, almost like many different countries. Like there's so many different languages, so many different state governments, state governments, and national government. Um, different sort of perhaps just the language part itself makes it hard to build applications for India that works across all of India. So I think that's quite exciting for us when we work with the Indian partners, at least, because and just the sheer scale, like the number of people who live in India versus people who live in the UK. Even if you get 1% or 10% of the population, that's a huge number. So what makes India quite challenging in an exciting way when we work with our partners there.
Okay. So among all the use cases of check, which one is particular excite you most?
The project that excites me the most, or the use case that excites me most about Check, is perhaps looking at a problem that we have just in online communities right now. For example, if Telegram, I'm sure you must have been contacted by someone who was pretending to be from a crypto exchange or pretending to be someone well known within the crypto community, or sometimes even pretending to be a different project. Or and we see the same thing happen on Discord. We see the same thing happen on Twitter. When Elon Musk he bought Twitter and he launched Twitter Blue, a lot of people just changed their name to say they were Elon Musk with a blue tick, and try and like send scam links that perhaps try and steal your NFTs or steal your crypto tokens. So I think just in general, there's also a problem where uh, we aren't necessarily saying that to be a legal identity. Like you might want to have a Twitter account which doesn't actually have your name, uh, but it's maybe perhaps a nickname that you've picked. But what we want to solve is people should be able to pretend to be that nickname and try and like scam people into like sending their money or sending crypto. And I don't think this is a crypto specific problem. I think it's also an issue with just general banking. So there's a very compelling sort of like use case around how do you prove that you're a real person online and you're interacting with the real person, that you're not interacting with someone who's a scammer. And I think that's got a massive sort of use case or number of people who'd be interested in doing that. And that's what excites me the most. It's basically if you are able to go to a website and you don't have to click login with Facebook, and you're able to say login with cheqd or login with similar blockchain-based systems, which gives you control and the data is sort of approved and in your hands. That fundamentally changes how likely your data is likely to get stolen and hacked. So that's what excites me the most.
Amazing. So check will also help us from scammers. So
Yeah.
at the last of the MA, would love to hear more about the project boot, the mystery one.
Uh, I can't go into a lot of detail on that yet because
No
still
problem, no
working away
problem.
on it. But I think one of the aspects of this that we wanted to address is um, a lot of this stuff is quite frankly boring when you think of opening new bank accounts and so we wanted to build a fun experience that perhaps has game-like aspects to it or social aspects to it while showing the scale of our technology. And so stay tuned. It should be out in the next couple of months. But it's an experience that we are building out that uses self-sovereign identity for something that people would actively want to use on a daily basis. And we're quite excited about putting it into the hands of our community, but stay tuned on that.
Thank you so much, Ankur, for taking part of our community, and thank you so much for sharing all the details regarding checked. And me, me itself, and my community is still waiting for the project boot. We will definitely contact you back when your project book is out. Thank you so much for taking part. Matthew, thank you so much for taking part for this AMA. Love to,
No problem. Thanks very much,
And
Ravi. It's good to meet you.
yeah, good to.
thank you for having
So,
us, Ravi.